so the big item to look at here is the computer software and licenses line. City Hall server, which we talked about, 21,010. The computer replacement rotation, $7,800. Software services, network and phone equipment, $2,800. You see the GIS, the open government, and the other software that we use for the department. So that's a large expenditure under general facilities, totaling $57,215. You can also see the $23,400 under that. That's the additional payroll portal, fixed assets, and backflow software. So that's a new expense. Overall, oh yeah, it's being funded from the equipment reserve also, the 20. It's the additional fund we set aside money in every year for purchases of equipment, vehicles, and that sort of thing.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do we know how many hours per month are dedicated to processing payroll?
About, I'm gonna say 75% of the time is payroll, and the other 25% is business license.
75% of the clerk's time
Per
is-
monthly hours.
75% of the clerk's office time is payroll,
Of the payroll clerk.
of the payroll clerk. And she's a full-time?
Yes.
Okay, if you turn the page to page 46, you'll see where the janitorial services are paid for, $13,500. Repairs and maintenance, we reduced from $40,000 to $30,000. We did have a bad 2017 as far as for a better year this coming year. So overall, you see the change in general facilities. Last year, $538,000. This year, $495,000.
Mr. Boyce,
Yes.
can I have you go back to 45 and look at the insurance line?
Sure.
I see it's for the first 2 years, a proposed $10,000 increase.
Right.
What's driving that increase? Is that from past sins, or is that from additional costs associated with things we're covering?
Well, that's basically claims history.
Well, I'm also adding square footage.
Oh, right. And the additional square footage for the fire department.
So is that a guesstimate?
It is, but we just got a renewal number packet in this week.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Just another, if I may, on the last page of 46, I think it's important to look at this line and understand the true costs of operating a large organization without effective leadership, because these are the kind of costs that hit an organization if you're not careful. The amount of money that we've had to pay over the last few years is a very large amount. And
It is.
so something to look at when you're considering, how much we're paying for judgments and claims or damages and costs associated with insurance claims, you know, you see that insurance covers it.
So be aware that the majority of that number is gonna be for the flooding that occurred at City Hall. And that number is, as of June 26th, has climbed higher.
I was looking at 2016.
Yeah.
2016
Right.
has some other
Yes.
costs associated with it.
There were the fines for the wastewater treatment plant that occurred. So, yeah, there were a number of unfortunate expenditures.
It's $150,000 over 2 years. 160 if you include the additional insurance that we're gonna end up having to pay next year, the insurance premium. So there's a cost associated with maybe running an organization on the lean, so to speak.
Well, and we had the potential of that being even higher, but we were able to negotiate down the L&I fines.
Yep.
That could have been as much as 92,000, I think.
Can I, along that same line, the budget is 2,000 for that for 2018. We're not with this thinking. What is the reason behind that number being 2,000?
Well, a big part of that is the lack of outstanding lawsuits that need to be settled, and other, the L&I fines, some of those things went away. We don't see, at least I don't see it at this point,
So that $2,000, is that what it is in any given year where there isn't anything going on, or is that?
So for instance, if we have a police collision or something, the deductible can range from $250 to $1,000. So we budgeted that mainly based on a deductible.
So you doubled your largest deductible for a claim?
We put in, budgeted for 2 deductibles
Mhm.
at $1,000.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, switching back to tab 2, community development. Get you a page number here. Page 95. So going into 2018, we're hoping to increase the permit tech position from 30 hours a week to 40 hours a week. It is a very busy office, and in discussion with the contracted planner we have now, he agrees with that assessment. So page 95, you can see the org chart. So right now it consists of the community development director, which we're advertising for. The building official has dropped down to 0. We're contracting that service out at this point. We're happy with the service the way it is right now. Hoping to continue that into 2018. We're also renegotiating the contract with the towns and enterprises that provide the service now that we have some real world, some better understanding of how much service they need to provide. I believe we can bring that dollar amount down, and that's reflected in the budget at this point also. The code enforcement officer, half-time, and we anticipate keeping it at that amount in 2018. So page 96, you can see the the breakdown on salaries, benefits, intergovernmental professional services. That is where we're paying the building official contract right now. It had been, I believe it was set at $100,000. We brought it down to 80. Operations, a little bit less. Capital outlay, there's no capital outlay. Box zoning and subdivision fees at 17 at 10,000. Other planning and development charges at 10,000. Pre-applications 3,500. Building permits again at 150,000, same as 2017. And plan review at 50,000. So revenues remaining pretty much constant. The next page, 97, goes into a little more detail about using Townsend and Associates as the building official. And also should be noted, the last paragraph under building, the fire life safety permits are no longer included as revenue for the city. Clark County Fire and Rescue is providing that service, and the fee is going directly to them. So we're still getting the service. It was kind of an in and out before, now it's going directly there. Planning, the narrative may not be exactly accurate here with the 0% COLA. So we've actually included the 2.7% COLA for the permit tech, and the planning director's salary has been moved in conjunction with the HR committee recommendation that we'll talk about next Monday. There were a number of enhancements that were asked for. We are funding on page 99 the full-time permit technician. And that's based on the amount of items going through the office right now, and the fact that we're outsourcing the building official. It helps with coverage to make sure there's someone in the department to assist folks when they come in. So that has been included in the budget. Page 101, code enforcement officer additional hours. That was requested by Ms. Smeller. We're not suggesting we fund that at this point. It's not included in the budget right now. The next page, 102, the permit technician salary increase. That is not funded. That should be a negotiated item when the union contract comes up. It's really something we shouldn't touch while there's a contract in effect. So that's not funded. And the final item was a large-scale planner or large-scale scanner plotter. We also did not fund this. Right now the department uses the plotter in Public Works, and it's a little inconvenient because of location, but we're going to continue utilizing that scanner plotter moving forward. So that's the Community Development Department. And next, I'll turn it over to Chief Kelly, unless there are questions.
Mrs. Heffernan has
Sorry,
a
Ms.
question.
Heffernan.
I know that there was a mention of wanting to take this department in a different direction, and I'm not seeing any narrative that explains what that is or what that looks like. Could you elaborate on what?
Well, what we're hoping to do is gain some efficiencies. Part of that is the full-time permit technician. Some of the efficiencies we're hoping to gain are based on the current planner's recommendations, and we're hoping to incorporate those moving forward. As far as the effect on the budget, the main effect is the only budget impact we have at this point is the increased hours for the permit technician. Any other questions?
Can we take a break before we move on, please?
Sure. How many minutes would you like? Okay, 10 minutes. It's 8:19. Oh, 1 minute now. 8:28. I'm back. And we're going to turn it over to Chief Kelly at this time.
Okay, so, as you know, we're 12 full-time employees. I'm looking at page 85, and I'll just cut right to the chase here. The only increase that we're gonna see is some of our external services, communications and jail services. Those are indicated, or there's a possibility that those will go up 5%, so I counted for that. Our salary and benefits just went up. They're gonna go up just a little bit, and that'll be from the HR committee's recommendations as part of that. Personal benefits, slight increase. Our operations is gonna increase just a little bit, and that's probably just from regular costs going up. Intergovernmental, I tried to trim that just a little bit, and we're gonna see a little bit of an increase in almost up to 5%. And then our capital outlay is where I could trim a little bit of the fat, and we're gonna reduce that a little bit. And I don't know if any of those costs are gonna go up at any time during the year. There's a whole bunch of things that could happen, but I don't anticipate anything unforeseen. The big items are already in the mayor's memo as far as a vehicle. I don't want to challenge some of our bigger officers with potential health problems later on, so I'm asking for another vehicle, a bigger vehicle for one of our bigger guys, and that's going to help in the long run. But and that was one of my program enhancements. Of course, and I noticed that I have a little bit of a typo in our department priority. The FTEs one should have been the first priority, and I'm sure we're all aware of that. But my second priority was an administrative sergeant, and that would help offset some of the costs in the long run as far as overtime is concerned, where an administrative sergeant would fill in for sergeants on vacation, be able to, and being a member of the collective bargaining unit, would be able to fill those shifts where I don't have that luxury. So the administrative sergeant could fill in when one of those sergeants are on sick leave or potentially vacation or something unforeseen. So that sergeant would be able to fill in that hole for that team, the existing team that's on. So it offset a little bit of the overtime costs that we're accruing at this time. The vehicle rotation, I asked for one extra than our regular vehicle rotation, and that was to hopefully keep up with our wellness goals as far as keeping officers healthy and comfortable. There's quite a few agencies that offer larger vehicles for officers who are 6'4" or better. And I would like to see one of our officers, at least one more of our officers, get a bigger vehicle to help with that wellness goal that we have. And that would be our third priority. The fourth priority, it's already being addressed by the HR committee, so I'll leave that one alone. Our mobile data computer rotation, I anticipate in the future eliminating our desktop computers where the officers can take that mobile computer out of their car and include that in the regular computer rotation and just have one computer assigned to each officer. That would incorporate all the sector issues, collision reports that they can generate inside their car. And if they get to a point where they're starting a report in their car, they can take that computer out, dock it at their workstations, and just have one computer, and that would be included in the rotation. Ultimately, we'd save a little bit of money not having to rotate 2 computers per officer or per FTE, where the desktop would be eliminated, and we wouldn't have to worry about those rotations every 3 or 5 years. I'm not sure what our schedule is for that. In the past, I'm familiar with a 5-year rotation, but I'm not sure what our rotation is there. But eventually getting that up to speed where it's just one computer per officer would take the load off in the long run as far as extra costs for 2 computers for each officer. And then our 6th priority, which is a new request, to build our reserve program. I've actually had, since I began my tenure here, I've had 2 officers or 2 people come in and ask about how they become reserve officers here in our city. And unfortunately, it doesn't, our budget doesn't allow that at this time. So it would help, having a 2-person car every Friday day shift. We have a 2-person car because our reserve officer comes in and hangs out with the day shift officer. So it gives us an extra body. And it has come in handy quite a few times since I've been here. And then my 7th priority is a surveillance camera, and that's only for building for the future. If we do at some point get some sort of facial recognition, I'd like to protect our front office personnel as far as taking a picture of who's coming in and making contact at the front window there. So it would look from through the window at who's coming in and having a conversation with the police, because sometimes they don't want to identify themselves in complaints and that type of stuff. So that would help us out in the long run. And then our 8th priority would be the Sally Port cover. We're already in the process of working on that. Sergeant Lipp is in the process of getting a bid, because I know that last year we talked about a $60,000 ticket, but we're looking at trying to drop that a little bit so we can complete that project, because I think it was the council, we moved forward with that last year as part of the budget. I'm not positive, but that's what I was told.
I think we indicated we needed a better number to bring back to council for their consideration.
And we're in the process of doing that. I don't have a solid number now, but I anticipate it being lower than the $60,000 number that was originally proposed.
And I know Sergeant Lipp has communicated that to my office a number of times, but they're having trouble, as we found out, getting bids from contractors because they're also busy. So actually.
And he is in the process of working on that now, so I anticipate that happening probably in the next week or 2, maybe by the time we get close to wrapping up our sessions with the budget. Yes, ma'am.
Looking at the enhancement requests, the first one, it says 3 additional police officer positions, and I know that the levy lid lift is covering 2 of those in the ballot measure that's proposed, or that's going out. So you're actually, assuming that passes, you're actually asking for 1 more above that?
Well, I will settle with the 2 and the administrative sergeant, so it kind of, I guess it would be, for lack of a better term, interchangeable. If the levy passes, that's going to offset a lot of our overtime costs, and those will ultimately pay for themselves. My ultimate goal is to have 4 more officers, So I'll take 3 officers and be able to spread them out a little bit so we can offset some of our overtime costs.
So, but for 2018, you are asking for for council to fund one more above the ballot measure.
I guess if the,
2.
if the ballot, yes, ma'am, if the
Okay.
ballot measure does pass, I would ask that the council would consider that.
So I could just take this, is it safe to say I could take the amount and just divide it by 3? Is that a fair idea of what one officer would cost? Or is that?
Yeah, well, I could give you the breakdown, and it's the same thing as,
Okay.
as when we talked about, at the Public Safety Committee meeting before the levy, before we actually decided to move forward with the mailer. Yeah,
I would like the amount for just one officer. I mean, if it's just dividing by 3, I can do that, but if it's not that simple.
I think, well, it is a little complicated as far as the equipment and the car and the uniform and that type of stuff. And I think the total, don't quote me on this, but I think the
Okay.
total was upwards in 193,000 for one officer.
So around 193.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And then, obviously, there would still be the need for continued an enhancement of staffing even after that, but,
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Just want to make sure that I understand what what you were requesting there, and
Yeah,
then.
that's my ultimate wish list.
Gotcha. Love to give it to you. Then the other one, the reserve officers.
Yes.
How many reserve officers does that $2,000 cover, and how many would you like to have?
I'd like to have as many as I could, but the $2,000 would pay for one officer to go to training,
Okay, so it's just one officer.
and that would be out of county. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have an amount that you're looking for? Like, you want 2, you want 4?
I'd love to have as many, I'd love to have 2-man cars every shift, but, our reserve
Right.
officers, they're doing this as a favor to the city of Woodland. And the one officer that we have contributes very well to our department and also participates in some of our training. As a matter of fact, we went down to the range today and I shot with him today. So he takes an active role in that. I don't know if we had 5 reserve officers, if they'd be as active, but they're additional officers that we can use for special events. All the special events that we have in our community. I would also encourage them, just like, as I do with the full-time officers, to appear at sporting events. Saturday mornings, walk around the lake during nice weather, those type of things. I mean, it's just, the more we're visible, the more people realize that we're here for them,
Right.
our community.
So this is 6 priority request, but $2,000 covers just one officer. So council could, in theory, say, we'll give you 6,000 so that you can have up to 3 officers if you could find the people to fill those positions. But you're just saying that you want.
I would like one additional.
One.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And I think that was all my questions, just those 2? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just to clarify the order of your priorities, so priority 1 was for 3 full-time officers, priority 2 was for an administrative sergeant.
Yes, sir.
If the levy passed and you got 2, would your first priority be the administrative sergeant or one more full-time officer?
Well, if the levy passes, that's part of the levy, is 2 officers and an administrative sergeant. So if the levy does
Okay,
pass.
so we're only leaving the 4th.
Yes, yes, sir.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was just, I'm thinking ahead. If I could get a 3rd officer and an administrative sergeant, that would be,
Okay.
that would help offset some of the costs that we're putting out on a monthly basis.
Ms. Rip? So, the city of Woodland's total budget is a little south of 18 million, is that? Okay. And of that 18 million, the city has $5.5 million in the general fund. And that's the pot of money that we can spend. We can't take the $12 million and spend it because those are all coming out of operating budgets that you cannot touch for general fund items. Is that accurate?
Yes, there are a number of funds that are dedicated or restricted, and they're not general fund money, such as the water and the sewer fund. Water has to operate under water revenue, and sewer has to operate under sewer. And then we also have some debt service funds, which are included in some of the 18 million. And also, we have some project funds that have been allocated for certain restricted funds, enterprise funds and things like that.
Okay. So the number I have is 5.5 million.
Yes.
And of that 5.5 million, that covers what we spend for the legislative, that's council, the judicial branch, which is the judges,
Mhm.
the executive branch, which is the mayor's office, finance, admin, legal services, personnel, civil service, general facilities, community development, planning and building, general government, the police department, code enforcement, the fire contract, non-expenditures for other agencies, capital outlays, transfers out, and the copiers. That's how we come to 5.5 million.
Yep, and that's shown on page 6 of our budget.
So if we're gonna cover $193,000 to fund a police officer, the only way to do that is to find 3%, because that's what that number is, of 5.5 million. You have to find 3% cuts on all those existing line items
Right.
in order to pay for it.
And some of those line items are not able to be cut. So general government has some services in there that are other agencies.
Okay?
We have Southwest Air Pollution Control, we have Department of Emergency Management, we have Association of Washington Cities, we have Dyking property taxes, and so that's just like a small sampling of some of the items that you're under contract to be able to have to pay those, and so you couldn't go to 3% to those.
So it's
So
probably more
so the-
realistically 5%
so the number grows.
because the 5.5 million just shrunk.
Right, and yeah.
Okay, so that's, and in this, based upon council action that has been previously taken, the budget has been set up based upon, well, we paid for a multi-year plan that hopefully hasn't been shelved. What was the gentleman's name that came here?
Luthi.
Say again.
$20,000 we paid Dr. Luthi.
Luthi.
Strategic plan.
The strategic plan, which should be driving this. And in that strategic plan, the council developed priorities that are now being funded. So if we're gonna change course, then it's up to us to explain how we're going to
Or revise the plan.
either revise the plan or change the course to fund a different priority that this body has now established, whatever that might be, by majority vote. But that's how we come up to fund any item. Clerk Treasurer's Department, when we're talking about the items that were added, that you're requesting that be added, the police department, where every department within the organization, in essence, is grasping at the $5.5 million, saying, we have priorities, we have priorities, we have priorities, and some of those priorities conflict. And so, if we want to change the course, then now's the time, well, hopefully, the time was a while back, but now I guess would be the time to say, okay, this is what we want to cut. And I know I've done that before myself. I've gone through here and I've said, I don't like this direction, and sometimes the council has agreed with me, sometimes they have not. But the time to do that, if we're gonna fund items within the police department, would be now. That would, and it would come from this body.
And then also looking at a long-range plan.
Right. Which was,
One year isn't.
but the long-range plan was already approved
Right.
by this body, and that is reflected in this budget. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for the chief? Okay, thank you, chief.
Mary, do you wanna take the fire
And we're gonna have the
department?
opportunity to come back to the chief. A lot of this is dependent upon 11-7, right? So we're gonna have an opportunity to come back and ask questions and,
We
okay.
have a workshop, I think, scheduled on the 13th of November. 13th of November for council comments and final changes.
Okay. Thank you.
So, the next item is the fire department, Park County Fire Rescue, contract. That is shown on page 15-1, as well as the expense on,
The sheet that you gave tonight, should that be inserted in there as well?
15-1, yes. So we're gonna talk about that one first, but it corresponds back
Oh, I see.
to page
51.
51. Expenditure. So, to explain this to you, Park County Fire Rescue, per their contract, is funded under a formula used based on property taxes. The revenues actually come in from a portion of the water, sewer, garbage, recycling, public utility tax that you see on the utility bills every month. And in 2018, we're estimating that to be $285,130. So that's a 6.5% rate on the utility usage that comes into the general fund that goes 100% over to fund the fire contract. The remainder of that is funded through a percentage of the property tax. Now, the formula used to arrive at the contract amount is based all off of assessed value. So the contract says we're gonna pay $1.50 based off our assessed value. So on page 15-1, you're gonna see the 2018 assessed value estimated rate is, assessed value is $715 million, a little over that. And then you multiply that times $1.50, divide that by 1,000, and you get $1,072,512 is our contractual amount that we're gonna pay to the fire department. That is an increase in the contract of $106,631. $106,631. Our collection, because we're limited to a 1% increase plus new construction, is only gonna be $64,903. So there you see the difference in how much more is going towards the contract versus what we're bringing in on the, and that is all based because of the assessed value, because assessed value is not limited to a 1% increase like the collections are.
Can you explain then why the city's, what appears to me, based on page 16, going to receive nearly $200,000 in additional property tax revenue for 2018 over 2017?
On page 15?
16.
No, page 16? So 2017 is estimated, we haven't got our final numbers in for that. If you actually turn back to page 15, you're gonna see our actual estimated numbers, 17, and look at side-by-side comparison to 2018. So we are looking at the collection going up, in the yellow box up there, we have 1.4 million is our total amount to be collected. And then that gets distributed out to a number of different areas. 117,000 that goes into the debt service fund for our police station. And the remainder that went into the fire department construction as well. And then a portion of that gets distributed into the general fund, and of that general fund portion is what goes over to the fire department. And then some of it goes over to the street fund, and then 10% goes into the park fund, and then that's the distribution on the property tax. So in 2017, our levy amount collected was 1.369 million. And our 2018 estimate is 1.34 million.
I'm sorry, I'm a simpleton, so I'm gonna ask this question. $175,000 increase year over year should more than cover the increase from the CCFR contract increase amount.
But that whole amount goes to the fire department, that's distributed to street, parks, general fund.
Okay.
And to the debt service. So you can't take 100% of that.
Got it, I
and give to
understand.
them.
And then what is the, can you point me again in the direction of, the utility tax and what that amount is?
That is on the revenue, and that is on page, on the first page, 31 of the revenue report.
Oh,
And then.
sorry, 30 what page is the-
Page
31.
31. And then if you add up the ones, there's not a subtotal there, but we did the math, and that's a little over 285,000. And again, we're not factoring in, any increase to that, because we're looking at right now being rate neutral on water and sewer garbage and recycling rates for 2018. So 0% increase for right now.
So I recall back in the day, it was costing us around $800,000 for our own fire department.
Yes.
And so 800,000 plus the, what'd you say, as far as the additional, what was the number that you used again?
285.
285, that's paying for it.
The rest is
We just need to make sure that we're not coming dependent upon using the money that's coming from the utility tax to fund other things. It has to fund the fire
It's
contract.
funding the fire contract.
Yeah, but it's more than paying for, it's paying for it.
Yes. If you add the utility tax for the, water, sewer, garbage,
Right.
recycling, plus percentage of the property tax that's paying for the fire department. But where the concern that I have is that we're basing the amount that we're paying the fire department off of our assessed value, which that property tax number isn't growing at the same rate, because we're limited to the 1% on the collection side of it.
Well, that, I know, was a discussion that we had when we approved the long-term fire contract, and it was a known issue, and it's my understanding that staff recommended approval.
So the contract, language was the same that we had in 2016 or 17. And actually, the fire department came back and reduced their rate to $1.38 instead of $1.50. So that was a negotiated, addendum to their contract,
Previous contract or the new contract?
the one right before that.
Okay.
And we don't know what property tax values are gonna do. We assume that they're gonna continue, assessed values are gonna go up, but, yes, some of that's been true, and then some of it dropped a little bit when we had a little bit of that recession. And the numbers went down some, but now they seem to be climbing again.
And I think you also need to take into consideration that with that new contract, they're going to take over some capital items, such as
Right.
fire apparatus. So that will have an effect on the bottom line also.
Right. But based upon what you've provided here, what the city was already paying for fire, and the utility tax that was passed to pay for that additional service and contract is paying for it.
So they were, in 2017, or 16, excuse me, the rate, for the 17 budget was 965,881. So we're going up from, that number up to 1,072,000.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I'm tracking. You're stating that if we had our own fire department, we would be writing a check for 800,000 right now. Is that
I'm using that as an approximate.
Oh, right,
That's
yeah.
what it was when, well,
Before
that's
they
what
came
it
up.
was, how many years ago? 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
costs increase
2012.
based on everything else, costs increase about,
Okay.
figure 3% a year, so you might tack on 18%.
Okay.
So yeah, it seems to me that it's
I
paying
think
for
the
it.
only point I wanted to make was that the increase in the assessed value, now the increase is going for the fire department, yes, and their costs have declined since 2012 as well. But the amount that the city is collecting in the additional amount for the property tax is not going into other departments' lease,
Mhm.
administration, any of that is going straight over to the fire department in addition to some other money, so. So the general fund share hasn't grown to help with other programs or, expenses, it's going straight to the fire department. So, combination of public utility tax and property tax is funding the fire department.
But over 50% of the budget is police and fire. So a majority of the budget is funded for public safety, which makes sense, because,
And if you look at other jurisdictions, you're going to see the same thing.
Yeah.
And then if you add court costs in there too,
Sure.
it's a huge part of the budget.
Any more
Okay.
questions on fire? Mrs. Heffernan?
So looking at page 15-1, the yellow highlighted at the bottom, the 106,000, which is the contract increase, and the city collection increase in green of just shy of 65,000. Am I to understand that the difference between that is a shortage that we have to make up?
That is just going to come straight off of the allocation in the general fund,
So 301?
not 301, no, just the 00. Yeah, 'cause we have a distribution formula, but that will come straight off the top of that. And that's included in the balanced budget right now.
So there is a shortage, but it's covered?
Yes.
Okay. And that's, I have 41,728, if my math is correct. All right.
Mhm.
All right, moving on, non-expenditures and operating transfers. So we're looking at page 53. Actually, I think we have them listed a little bit inversely on the agenda here. Let's start with capital outlay at the top of that page. So in here, we have $2,800 allocated for a postage meter, $1,800, and some miscellaneous furniture and chairs to make up the remainder. Then you see budgeted the $45,500 for the police vehicle that we funded this year. You also see the $25,000 for the MDT replacements, the computers for the police department. And basically, that's the capital outlay for the department this year. So total is $73,300. Any questions?
Where would I find the ending fund balance for each one of these funds?
For near the front of the document, page 5, is it?
I want to hand it out. There's a column on that worksheet that shows the fund balance.
Far left, or far right?
So, this page? So it
I
doesn't
believe
tie
so.
in, it doesn't tie in with the GL numbers.
Oh,
So 594-14, so, or if I wanted to see what we have currently in capital outlay equipment as the ending fund balance, where would I see that number?
well, we consider it part of the general fund, so we track
Okay.
the general fund balance. But,
So here's what I'm going after.
Okay.
If I'm putting $20,000 a year, and maybe I'm not spending anything for 5 years, now I have $100,000 in there and I'm spending 25, well, my ending fund balance at the end of the year is gonna be 75,000. Follow my math there?
Yeah,
What I'm trying to determine is how healthy are those funds? Do they have an ending fund balance in them? What do those look like? Or
all right.
do you know where I would find that information in this budget?
43 has
It's-
3 years, history. It's the very first line item of expenditure report.
Is it 43?
Ending fund balance is always the first line in the expense for each fund.
So overall, there's a ending fund balance for the general fund, but not broken down by departments
Okay.
within the general fund. So right now, the general fund has an ending fund balance of $230,708. But I think it's important when you look at the general fund balance, you look at it in conjunction with Fund 301, the capital project reserve, which is sitting at $1,026,000. Basically, we use that Fund 301 as sort of a savings account for general fund items, and, yeah, so it's important to look at them in concert, I believe.
Can I ask a question about the 301 since you brought it up?
You bet.
The retail sales tax allocation, are you, when you're taking the retail sales tax allocation, are you allocating that based upon current council policy? Or have you changed council policy to reflect what it has done in past years? What is being reflected? And I'm talking specifically about the retail sales tax portion that you put into the 301 general reserve. I think it's 10% of the retail sales tax.
Right.
Can you tell me what the number is that you're using to put into that account balance?
So, that would be,
This one, across there.
yeah, so, well, that's the, I'm sorry, that's the, you're talking about this?
Contribution from general fund to
Well, the sales tax.
Yeah, so this is.
Yeah, so the contribution from the sales tax that the general fund provides, the contribution to 301 is zero, and it's been zero for the last 3 years. Basically, the general fund is needing those dollars to remain operational, yeah.
Right, okay.
So-
So just something to note for the new year.
Right,
If
so-
that's the current policy that we're gonna go with, we probably should update the ordinance to reflect what we've been doing the last
Yeah,
5 years.
I agree. And
Okay.
when we get to the revenue side of things, you'll see that breakdown
Okay.
on all of it.
That's what the minutes noted.
I was just
Yeah.
curious to understand if I had $100,000 to play with, but I don't, is
No.
what you're saying.
No, and this
Okay.
year, the allocation would be the $133,540 if we were to make that transfer. So we noted it there so
Got
council
it.
would understand
Yep,
what that
okay.
amount is.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Right, so, since we're talking about operating transfers, we'll move down there. So you'll see, the contribution to 104, which is, street. The contribution of sales tax that the general fund collected is $267,280. The estimate's up, just a small bit from the previous year, $261,000. The contribution to 301, gambling tax revenue. Last year, you see $230,000 contributed to 301. This year, 37,000. And the reason for that is, you know, the new casino opening and the loss in revenue at the Oak Tree. Right, right. So, yeah, that's a good thing to point out. when we budgeted the $230,000 amount, that was considering that they would be, you know, at full force throughout the year. But that didn't happen because of the opening of the new casino. So the actual will come in much less than that 230,000.
Yes.
So it's good to note that in 301, City Council, a long time back, made a crucial decision to only use those funds for equipment expenses, one-time expenses. If we were funding salaried positions or some ongoing expense, we'd really be having a hard time right now. But you know, that gambling revenue is a big part of that fund balance, and it does have an effect, and you can see that
Yeah.
on the fund balance this year,
Yeah.
projected fund balance. Also, there's a contribution to Fund 304, the Equipment Reserve Fund. That's 1% of sales tax. We're making that contribution again this year, $13,364. And the general fund also makes a contribution to the water fund for fire hydrants, and that's at $3,500. So the total operating transfers out are equaling $321,444. Last year, the budgeted amount was $507,000, but again, that was based on the anticipation of higher gambling revenues, which are not happening. So,
Do we have, is it possible to get a 6-year history on the ending fund balance for the 301 general reserve?
Of course.
Just to get a little bit of understanding of where we were at, because
Mhm.
where we were
you're
at.
saying 6 years?
Yeah, where we were at 6 years ago, I wanna say that number was maybe a little under 300,000. And we've been able to, increase the rainy day fund up to what our policy says, which is $1 million.
I think I provided.
You may have already
I
provided
provided that
that.
to the finance committee a couple times a week and updated it.
Yeah, if you could,
Yeah,
I don't know if it has a 6-year history, but
I think so.
that'd be
If
great if
not,
you could
we'll
just
get
send
it.
that. I don't know if everyone wants it, but I would love it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on, other funds, debt service funds.
So is just, our mayor had to leave. Is, other funds and debt service funds, is that something we wanna tackle tonight? Do we want to adjourn and start on that, since it's a new?
It's the fine point to break.
9
if that's
o'clock,
what
I
city
think it might be
council-
a good place to break.
For the debt service, I was gonna give you a summarized version